You be a good girl? Yeah. It's been too cold or too rainy or both for me to paint. I want to get out of the house and do something, so I'm going to go to a cafe. And if I can find a nice view, I'll paint the view, and otherwise I'll just do some sketching. And I tried to leave Poppy at home because she can be a real menace at cafes or restaurants, but well, I'll show you. She guilted me into it. Are you gonna be a good girl? Are you gonna be a good girl? It's cold. It's too late in the day to be going out for coffee, but needs must. I've got my eye on this building. I'm intrigued by the architectural details, and I like the pop of blue sky against the red brick. And it's right across the street from the cafe, so hopefully I can get a window spot. It's the end of the day, so it's pretty quiet, which is nice. Yeah, pretty good.
Very appealing.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Like, or little girl.
Yeah, she's happy to be out. I found a spot by the window and made a little nest for Poppy here. And I brought some reinforcements of treats and things to give her for when she's naughty. She knows this jar. I have a nice view of the building from the inside. I don't have a lot of time before the cafe closes. I think maybe about 50 minutes. And I wish the window was a bit cleaner, but at least it's nice and warm and I have a hot drink. I think this is a pretty realistic snapshot of painting in a cafe in less than ideal circumstances. The weather's dreary, the cafe's closing soon, etc. But that's also just life, and I wanted to show how it's possible to get some art practice in, even on days when the stars aren't aligned and you don't have enough time. I'm not sitting at a table, and I love the way that I can just put this Sendak over my lap, and it just has everything that I need, and nothing is going to fall out because everything is really secure. And just in the 5 minutes that I've been here, it's already starting to rain. And this is what the weather's been like here for the last several weeks. You get 2 minutes of sun, and just when you think everything's going to be fine, it starts raining again. So I'm thinking something like this. Or I could pull it further back, but I think given the amount of time that I have, this has enough visual interest. I'd like to get a little more sky in, and I like the nice subtle three-point perspective that I have going on here. When I have a complicated building like this, I start by blocking in the main shapes and measuring them against one another to get my proportions correct. And then I place them down on the paper in the way that I saw them in the viewfinder. If I can get those main shapes in first, then I can go in later and add the details, and they'll be placed in the correct areas. I wish that I had a little bit more time to do things like the really intricate Corinthian columns, but because I'm pressed for time, the best that I can do is to try to just give an impression of that. I'm using my Pentel mechanical pencil here, and the lead is 0.3, which I find to be really ideal for these smaller paintings. They're closing really soon, so I probably have about 25 minutes to ink this very quickly, and maybe add a tiny bit of color. I'm using my Kaweco Lilliput fountain pen. I've added some waterproof sketch ink to it, and so far I'm liking it. It's got an extra fine nib, so I'm able to vary the line weight. It's good practice to try to complete a painting in a limited amount of time occasionally. It's too easy to micromanage drawings and paintings when you have unlimited time, and this forces you to keep your lines and brush strokes looser, which will bring more energy to the painting. I'm trying here to add some of the details with the columns and some of the other distinguishing features. It's a little bit tricky with such a small painting to do that, and I found that a lot of times less is more, just giving that impression of what's there without trying to put in every single tiny detail. I'm also paying attention to where I see the darker shadows and trying to vary my line weight to reflect that. I also wanted to put in these wires in the sky because they bring the eye back to the main focal point of the building, and they're just interesting. So I've made it this far, and I'm going to stop with the drawing here because I only have about 5 minutes before the cafe closes. I'm just going to add a little bit of color to the sky and a little bit to the red parts of the building, And then I'm going to call this a wrap. I think they've turned down the lights in the cafe, so I'm struggling a little bit to get the camera to focus, but I'm gonna do the best I can here for you. I've added a bit of ultramarine toned down with a bit of the transparent red oxide for the sky. And now I'm basically using those same two colors, but with more of the transparent red oxide to put in the base coat for the bricks on the building. I'm gonna come in a little bit later with some redder bits and also some darker parts. But I want to get it all covered first. She's Poppy. Surprisingly, she's being pretty well behaved. She isn't always. Maybe. She better behave. She's 9. Yeah. She's a big girl, aren't you? Yeah, you're a big girl. Thank you. I've added a bit of the transparent yellow oxide with just a touch of the new gamboge for the stone areas of the building. And I'm going in now with a second layer of just the transparent red oxide and just a little tiny bit of the ultramarine, and dabbing that into the areas where I see a bit more color on the building, and adding a little bit to the shadows as well. And I'm being really careful to be strategic about where I add it and not to just uniformly place it everywhere. And now I'm adding a second layer of the stone color to add a little bit of texture and extra definition to those areas. And then I'm darkening some of that for the shadows as well with a little bit of the ultramarine and a touch of the transparent red oxide. And I'm just putting that in the areas where I see the deepest shadows under the eaves and at the tops of the windows. So far, I've done all of the painting using my larger brush, but I'm switching now to the smaller one. And now with my smaller brush, I'm adding my darkest shadows. And those are a combination of all of those colors, but a little bit more on the cool side because it is the end of the day and it's overcast and there really isn't much sun shining at all anymore. So I'm down to the wire here with time, so I'm really just squinting at the subject and looking for those darkest shadows, because when I don't have a lot of time to add color, it's important to at least make sure that the shadows are in the right area. It's bittersweet because even with just another hour, I could have added so much more detail, but not every painting is meant to be a masterpiece, and that's okay. And then I'm also adding a little bit where I see this tree on the right-hand side. There's just a tiny bit of the trunk and some branches, but I do think it helps, again, guide the eye back towards the building. And that's it, closing time. So I have to hurry to put everything away, and then we'll go look at everything outside in the twilight. So I finished right as they were finished. Just as I finished, the street light went on. So here's what we've got. So this wasn't quite the painting cafe adventure that I had envisaged to film for today. The lighting was far too bad in there, so the camera wouldn't really focus on what I was drawing and I had to kind of skip over things, but I'll make it up to you. We'll do a better one next time. It's still nice to get out. And this was a super quick painting. In a way, I feel like I ruined it by adding the color too quickly, but I can fiddle around with it a little bit when I get home. And it's always nice to get out and practice painting. So I highly recommend. And I feel better just for having gotten out of the house, watching the rain from a different window. And Poppy was such a good girl. Yes, she was. Say goodbye, Poppy. Bye.